What is music? Music is beautiful, and it sounds like this. It also sounds like this. And sometimes it sounds like this.
Somebody once told me.
This guy is really good at music. In April of 2017, June Lee released a series of video interviews with Jacob Collier. In them, June wants to know Jacob's secret formula.
Negative harmony, microtonal voice leading, super ultra hyper mega meta Lydian scale.
Jacob, not knowing the power of the secrets he holds, passionately answers, sharing the awesome power and also his fascination and enthusiasm with the world.
Well, let me tell you right now.
Among the many topics, there is one that does not get enough academic attention. The idea of this super ultra hyper mega meta Lydian sound, or as I will from now on call it, Summel, because boy is that a mouthful. To give Summel some much deserved theoretical credibility, I will now talk about it for the next several minutes and hopefully put it into a consumable and succinct definition. In doing this, I hope to answer the question, at least for me, what is music? I present
Summel.
in 5 parts. Part 1, an introduction. First, let me explain what I meant by theoretical credibility. There's a long history of musicians, or even just musical enthusiasts, analyzing great musical works, and subsequently applying general abstract theories to answer the question,
what makes this song great?
As it turns out, a lot of different music is great for a lot of different reasons. And so there ended up being this huge wealth of music theory to dive into. Theoretically speaking, Summel is an advanced concept, so I will need to use music theory to explain in words what Summel is. At any point, if you feel overwhelmed, pause the video and work it out for yourself. I offer these words of encouragement. Music theory is just vocabulary that categorizes a sound, and you are likely familiar with a lot of these sounds and therefore are more than capable of learning the vocabulary. Sonically speaking, Summel is quite popular, and I'm sure you have heard at some point Summel in some form. This is a standard piano keyboard. I'm sure you have seen one of these before. You may not have noticed that it is made up of a pattern consisting of alternating groups of 2 and 3 black keys, each separated by 2 consecutive white keys. This isn't really all that important for the concept, but I figured I'd mention it anyway. It's pretty cool.
Cool beans.
This lesson is best learned while sitting at a piano, one with 88 keys if possible. But if that's not possible, then this one I have here will do. I will keep this piano here on screen for as much of the video as possible. Before we can dive into Summel, let's get some of the basics out of the way. First, the difference between the 2 different colors of keys. The white keys are natural notes represented by letters in the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, while the black keys are sharps and flats represented by hashtags and lowercase italic b's coming after the letter. I'll talk about sharps and flats soon. Part 2, Music Theory. If we play any 8 consecutive white keys, either ascending or descending, we get a sound that is often categorized as a scale. Music theory, yay! We can categorize these scales further by using their fancy Greek names, or more commonly, just as major or minor scales. Scales are, correctly so, assumed as fundamental vocabulary in the musical language. Fun fact, the black notes played consecutively make up the traditional Western pentatonic scale. For the purposes of Summel, we will be concerned with one scale in particular, the Lydian scale. And it sounds like this. What's really interesting about the piano is that any scale can be played from any key on the keyboard, white or black. The position and number of white versus black keys is dependent on which key is started from. This is what makes the piano such a notoriously complicated instrument to learn. A scale's shape on the keyboard is dependent on what note it starts from. Because of the underlying pattern of white and black keys, the one that I mentioned earlier, specific distances of either one or two keys can be determined for each step in a scale, and so the correct pattern for any given scale emerges. What's even more interesting is that each unique note on the piano, there are 12, can be separated by a distance equal to 5 steps in any scale. Except for Locrian, but we don't talk about him. This creates what we call the circle of fifths. The sound of the circle of fifths is just as recognizable as any scale, and we can even give it a vocabulary term just like we did with scales, such as its namesake, we could just call it the circle, or even a term like quintal harmony, which means chords built off of fifths. Quintal harmony is an elegant way to describe the quality of sound that arises from playing notes in order according to the circle of fifths. With these two pieces of vocabulary, the Lydian scale and the circle of fifths, aka quintal harmony, we are ready to tackle
Summel.
Part 3, Summel, better known as the Super Ultra Hyper Mega Meta Lydian. Let's go back to the keyboard. You also may not have noticed that it's a mirror. Right here at middle D, as I like to call it, the piano mirrors itself across its vertical axis. In other words, what's on the left of middle D is a mirror image of what's on the right. There's actually a second mirror, but we'll get to that later. Technically, there are 12 mirrors because that's how circles work, but I'm not going to talk about the other 10. You're welcome. Now let's go back to those black keys, sharps and flats. We're just going to talk about sharps. Scales starting from anywhere will always have one letter in alphabetical order for each note, and will follow the circle of fifths for their assignment of sharps. If the white key replaced by a black key is located below it, then we call it a sharp. So the first sharp we add is F sharp, contained in the key of G major. We follow the circle for the rest, C sharp in D major, G sharp in A major, and so on. If we play all the sharp notes all at once, we get a quintal chord. And as we discussed earlier, quintal chords follow the circle of fifths. Math checks out. Let's call this the Summel chord. Technically, this chord has nothing to do with Lydian yet, but bear with me in my insistence on calling it the Summel chord. So let's apply the Lydian scale to Summel. Let's put the L in Summel. First of all, let me just call the Summel scale what it is using existing music theory. Summel is a series of Lydian tetrachords that follow the circle of fifths. So what the heck does that mean? Let's start at middle C. We can find that right below the middle D I mentioned earlier. Tetra means 4, and a chord is 3 or more notes, so a tetrachord is a 4-note chunk. A Lydian tetrachord is the first 4 notes from the Lydian scale. We can play them all together as the namesake would suggest, but I'm just going to play them one at a time as a scale. The 5th note in our scale, for now that's G, is the start of the next tetrachord in the series that will make up the Summel scale. G is also the next stop going clockwise on the circle of fifths. We can repeat this series indefinitely, but let's stop after we have played every note found in the Summel chord we just discussed.
You know?
We can go one step further, adding the imaginary note E sharp to the Summel chord, playing the B Lydian scale, which ends on F sharp, the starting point of our Summel chord. If we go another step, playing an F sharp Lydian scale, we get B sharp enharmonic to C, which is where we started our 5-note Lydian scales. The secondary imaginary sharp is the last natural note we had left, therefore giving us an entirely sharp musical alphabet. This is the sound of the Summel scale, a series of Lydian tetrachords following the circle of fifths.
You know?
Part 4. Summel. The reason I only explained sharps is because the piano is a mirror. The flats are a mirror image of the sharps. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat is also a quintal chord, built from every flat in order according to the circle of fifths, going counterclockwise. It is a mirror image of the Summel chord. The mirror image of the Summel scale is a descending super ultra mega meta Locrian scale, or the Summel scale.
If you go that's like the opposite.
Descending, we start at the E above middle D, since that is our mirror image, and end up playing Locrian tetrachords starting from their 5th scale degree, descending onto new tonics, adding the necessary flat to continue the Locrian pattern, until we finally arrive at B flat, the 1st flat, the starting place of this Summel chord. Of course, a 5-note Locrian scale from B flat gets us back to our starting place of E, or in the case of B flat Locrian, F flat. This is all to be expected since it is a mirror image of the Lydian pattern. Math checks out. We should call the notes that our Summel chords end on by their enharmonic name, in order to continue Summel until we arrive all the way back where we started, instead of landing on an imaginary tonic, which would happen if we just kept going with either Summel scale. In other words, once we arrive at our 6th sharp or flat, E sharp or C flat, either in the Summel chord or scale, it is necessary to change the note names to their enharmonic equivalents so that we end up back at middle D and not middle C double sharp or E double flat. As I mentioned earlier, I like to think of a second mirror at A flat or G sharp, the middle black key. If we think about middle D as the middle white key, the second mirror becomes an even more obvious pattern. The only difference between the two mirrors is that the black key mirror starts at 6 sharps or flats, while middle D is all naturals. In other words, middle D is the top of the circle of fifths, while the black key mirror is the bottom. Part 5. Conclusion. Hopefully this lesson was consumable for beginner to intermediate pianists, theorists, or even just musical enthusiasts. I believe Summel to be a fundamentally important aspect of learning the piano, and more specifically visualizing the piano keyboard. There is a beautiful design to the modern piano keyboard that's worth explaining. It's something I'm passionate about. Our hands are mirrored, and so is the piano. I believe we should teach that about the instrument even to relative beginners. If anyone is showing interest in the piano, they should be inclined to, and be able to, find lessons on the patterns of the keyboard itself to help them navigate its complexity. Mentors should be trained in this area of expertise, and more beginner-friendly piano books should include Summel in their introduction to the instrument. I, personally, particularly enjoy the Complete Book of Chords and Scales by Alfred Music, as it's organized by sharps and flats according to the circle, includes a circle on the back of the cover, and even mentions tetrachords on the first page. But still, even with all of that, it doesn't mention Summel, or mirrors, or even black or white keys. At the beginning of this essay, I said I would try and answer the question, what is music? And I think I have. To me, Summel is kind of like music. Music is a landscape. It's a place with patterns, and it's somewhere I can go. It's somewhere that I can traverse inside of and discover new and old places. And I hope to share that place with you. Thanks for watching. I'm really sorry if this is confusing. It's just music theory. That's how it is.